just a couple bad weather fans representing New York, talking all things sports. Man, what could go wrong? We got Alex, who's a fan of the Knicks, and Mike of the Nets. The yin-yang of the tri-state, place your bets on the Yankees, Giants, Mets, or Jets. Yeah, you should listen if it's sparking your interest. If you made a vow to your team, don't break it. Bad weather fans is the relation.
That's right. This is Bad Weather Fans, episode number 97. Mike Biseglia, Alex Benezowitz. The Brooklyn Nets, 23-9 overall in the season, while the New York Knicks get a win yesterday, improved to 16-18, and slip into that number 10 spot, the play-in games for the playoffs. Alex still on vacation. He is in Hawaii enjoying his honeymoon. He will be back in the new year for 2022. So we've been continuing to have some guest co-hosts come here on Bad Weather Fans. It's been a lot of fun, and we got a new one today. It's Evan Roberts. He is the co-host of Harden and Roberts on WFAN. You can find his great podcast, the Evan Roberts podcast, and then the Brooklyn Basketball podcast, which is fantastic as well. You got to check that out. Sometimes he's kind enough to let me on that. So, Evan, how the hell are you?
Oh, it's good to finally let out my Knick fandom on a podcast where I can show my true love for everything orange and blue. Go New York, go New York, go. The Knicks are back, baby.
Yeah, huge win for you guys. Minnesota depleted a little bit. I mean, they were missing a couple of their good players on a back-to-back, but who cares? A win's a win. It's about getting momentum, getting W's. Doesn't matter if RJ Barrett took him 30-something minutes to score his first point, and that Julius Randle maybe took a couple of bad shots and didn't have a great percentage from the field. It's about getting wins, and that's 2 in a row, building off what I believe the best Christmas win of all time versus the Hawks.
Well, listen, here's the bottom line. Mitchell Robinson is the best center in the NBA. I don't think there's anything Kevin Durant can do that Julius Randle can't. I think that's pretty obvious. And Kemba Walker, the BK is in the house. The Timberwolves are loaded. I don't want to hear about how they're missing guys. Malik Beasley's tremendous, man. That was a stellar victory. We're on our way. Bring on Brooklyn. All right, I can't do this anymore, Biseglia. I've tried to pretend. I've tried to find my inner Knick fanness, and I can't go more than 30 seconds without needing to take a hot shower, so I apologize.
Well, I got to give you a lot of credit, though, because you do watch every single one of these stupid Knick games that you do, and it's impressive. And it really is, and you watch that. We were texting a little bit, yesterday. In all seriousness, though, for the Knicks, more of, it's a win, but that would have just been a disastrous loss if they were not able to go into Minnesota against a depleted roster and get that victory in games they need to win, as the schedule is a little bit softer now than it was a few weeks ago.
Dude, jokes aside, and Doc Rivers actually went off on this recently. He was asked about kind of barely getting by a depleted Raptor team. And Doc went on this rant saying, hey, dude, a win is a win in the NBA. Like when we were losing games shorthanded, but we were really close, nobody was giving us credit for that. And Doc's 100% right. So, yeah, the Timberwolves are ravaged by injuries. And you're right that if the Knicks lose the other night in Minnesota, it's a horrific loss. But at the end of the day, a win's a win. Were they fortunate that the Timberwolves shot like 17% from three? Sure. But as Net fans, we've experienced a few of those wins this year as well. And now sitting at 23-9, do you ever go back and look at certain wins and say, well, that one was dirty. Well, that one was lucky. No, a win's a win. And I think when you're the Knicks right now, who are trying to make up ground and get back towards 500, they do have a great opportunity because of what the schedule looks like right now. You got to win every game you can. Now, there are things we could peel apart from yesterday's game and continue, including the continuing trend that Tom Thibodeau hates Obi Toppin, that doesn't continue to give him the minutes he deserves. Julius Randle can play as crappy as possible, and Julius will still play 37 minutes a night. And Obi Toppin continues to grow as a player, and he maxes out at like 18 minutes a night. And I think last night against Minnesota, he played like 14 minutes. So you can certainly pick things apart. But jokes aside, a win's a win's a win's a win. And no one 2 weeks from now is going to remember how they beat the Timberwolves, just simply that they beat the Timberwolves.
Yeah, and that's what happens too, is if you look at some of these streaks when teams get hot and they do have 5, 6, 7 game winning streaks, it's always in the beginning. They couple some of those ones that they're supposed to get, and it does truly build confidence when you can start to win games. But on that Obi topic, what is it in your view that Coach Thibodeau will not make the move to give him more minutes? I know this is kind of it's a weird dynamic because they drafted Obi Toppin. I didn't think they had in mind that RJ Randle was going to be an all NBA second team player and play as good as he did. Now you fast forward the Hawk series into this year, Obi's ascending, and Randle's clearly coming down a little bit. What is it that you think's keeping Coach Thibodeau from saying, all right, Obi Toppin, lottery player, second year, showing signs. Why can't we give him 30 minutes?
He doesn't trust Julius and Obi on the floor at the same time, which is the way that Toppin's going to get big minutes. It's the way that he's really going to be unlocked. I mean, I think we've known this for over a year now, that when you look at the way this team is built, and look, Mitchell Robinson was great last night, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think last night, the Minnesota game was more going to be of less Julius Randle, more Obi Toppin than really what I'm getting at, which is both of them on the floor at the same time. Mitch was great last night. Mitchell Robinson was the best player on the floor. He's the main reason why they won the game. But on most nights, that's what it is. And I think a lot of it is a lack of trust defensively that those two guys can coexist on the floor. You know, Quentin Grimes is getting to play right now, and he's earned it. But I think in general, Tom Thibodeau, it takes a while to kind of trust the younger players. But that's the big frustration point here for Obi Toppin. He's in his second year in the league, and I can't sit here and tell you he isn't growing as a player. He clearly is. I think you saw at the Minnesota game, there was that quick confidence when he had the open corner three. He wasn't thinking as much. He was just shooting, and he's getting better and better. So really it's going to be about Tom Thibodeau either lowering the amount of minutes that Julius Randle plays, which I don't think he'll ever do because Julius is a drug for him, or trusting the two of them to share the floor at the same time more. But he hasn't done it yet, which is why Toppin is kind of stuck in that 15, 17-minute range.
So strange, though, because it's a lottery pick on a team that's trying to get better. And typically in the second year, if you're a lottery pick and you're showing signs, you get more minutes. This is not like new to the NBA. So it's bizarre that Coach Thibodeau cannot give him those minutes and figure out a way to do it. Because I'm a human being. I'm a normal person. Obi Toppin, I don't care if you grew up in New York and you love the Knicks. There's going to come a point as a human being where you're like, dude, I got to play basketball. I got to earn a living. I need to show the world that I can be a better player. At some point, there has to be a little give and take. Or are we going to go a whole year where he plays 11 minutes a game and Julius Randle's on the court? I can't get over that. You can't be that stubborn. You can't be that stubborn.
You know how he's going to finally play in big minutes? When he doesn't have a choice. And I can't sit here predicting injuries, nor do I want to. I don't want to predict who's going to go on the COVID list. But next year, Mitchell Robinson is not going to be on this team. If I had to predict, and that's not necessarily a knock on Mitch more than it is, I don't think they're going to pay him. I don't think you need to pay guys like that much money. And they do have Nerlens Noel under contract for the next couple of years. So I think Mitch is probably off this team next year. And I think at some point there's going to be less options where we are going to see more of Toppin and Randle on the floor at the same time. Because I don't think they're trading Julius Randle anytime soon. But I think a lot of this is that, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, Tom Thibodeau wants to win basketball games. That's his main focus. I don't think he's thinking about developing guys. The reason Quentin Grimes is playing right now is not because he's thinking about developing Quentin Grimes, is because Grimes is helping them win. When Deuce McBride is back in the rotation, assuming he can get back in the rotation, he's going to play because in Tom Thibodeau's mind, he gives them the better chance to win. Right now, and there's no ill intentions here, he doesn't trust Toppin and Randle on the floor at the same time. He trusts Julius to play 36, 37 minutes, even on nights where he's turning the ball over, even on nights in which his defensive intensity isn't what you want it to be. He trusts Julius more, and I understand that, considering what Randle did last year. So I think it's just a head coach that's not thinking maybe along the lines of some Knicks fans who are thinking more about the development of guys long-term. Tom Thibodeau is figuring out how he can win every freaking game possible. That's his focus.
Yeah, it has been wild to see Randle this season kind of come back to where he regressed a little bit to more of his career averages, and just weird to have somebody be all NBA second team, dominate games, win games, put the team on their shoulders, and then more or less, Evan, see a fan base really flip on their star player. You don't You don't see that very often to go, Randle, we love this guy. He's come in. He's all about the Knicks. This is everything we want. Now, do we need to see him benched? Very strange to see that happen in such a quick amount of time with Randle.
Well, think about this. So this is Julius's third year with the New York Knicks. If this was his second year and we took out a year ago his all-star incredible year that he had where they were the 4 seed, but this was year 2, Knick fans' view of Julius Randle would be a lot higher. A lot of it is where the expectations are from. And the expectations were from, I made a sarcastic joke earlier, but there were some Knick fans who were so in love with Julius last year, they genuinely thought, hey, this guy's as good as KD. And I think that's how crazy the bar got. So I think a lot of the frustration and turning on Julius Randle is that last year he was the best player on a team that finished well above 500, that had a home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. Before that, he was a guy most Knicks fans wanted to trade after his first year. So I think Julius, unfortunately for him, because he's not a bad guy, he's doing nothing wrong in terms of, I guess maybe sometimes his defensive intensity is the one thing you can get on. I think he's falling victim to the expectation game. And the expectations he built last year were very, very high, which is why I think there's a good amount of Knicks fans that have turned on him and are ready to deal him out for Ben Simmons.
Yeah, it was funny because I think I was driving around doing Uber Eats. It was on a Saturday, I want to say. And you were doing your Saturday show on the Fan. And somebody had called in and said, I wouldn't deal Julius Randle for Donovan Mitchell.
Yes.
I kind of remember that. And I'm going, all right, Randle's having a solid season. He's very good. But I don't, Donovan Mitchell is an all-world scorer who's going to be a perennial all-star and a dominant player in this NBA. And I remember that clearly going, wow, somebody doesn't want to trade Julius for Donovan.
I will defend that person and Knicks fans and sports fans in New York in general. And I've always had these arguments when I did the show with Joe back in the day, and I'll probably still have them to this day. Nobody wants to trade someone when their value is high. It's a constant. Like, no one wants to do it. I'll give you a Met analogy for the Knicks Met fans out there. 2 years ago, if we suggested trading Jeff McNeil, you would think that was sacrilegious. How could you trade Jeff McNeil? He's hitting 330. He's Tony Gwynn. Now Jeff McNeil's coming off a mediocre season in which he was choked by Francisco Lindor. And I think there's a lot more apathy towards the idea of trading Jeff McNeil. So for that Knicks fan who called in on that Saturday, and I remember it, and I think he remembers it, while I think he's nuts, I understand it. Like, you just got to put yourself in those shoes. I always say this to Net fans, Knicks fans, Met fans, Yankee fans. Think about it as if it was your team. If there was a guy you had created an emotional bond with over 3 years and he was leading you to a better place than you ever expected, are you in the mood to trade him right away? I remember Joe and I had an argument. This is going to make you laugh, but to go way back when, he didn't want to trade Landry Fields straight up for Carmelo Anthony. And that was during the Melo stuff. Right. And I know we laugh about it now. We're like, oh, my God. Understand how Knicks fans felt towards Landry Fields in that moment. Understand how we felt about Karis LeVert 3 years ago. I mean, yeah. So while he's wrong, that caller, and I think most people listening would nod and say, of course he's wrong, I get the emotional attachment that we start to create as fans. It's understandable, and I think we all do it at times.
Yeah, that's a good point. We were prisoners of the moment as well when the Harden deal happened, and it was LeVert and Allen and all the million picks to get James Harden. I know your reaction. We were upset. I wasn't feeling it. I think now, fast forward, here we are a year later. We have a different viewpoint of that, especially now, too, Evan. James Harden has put back-to-back performances, and more in particular, that last game that he had on the road versus the Clippers. We finally got to see the James Harden that we fell in love with last year in the regular season. Do you have belief that this Harden is here to stay? And this is the version of him, and it's not just a blip of 2 spectacular basketball games, and in particular that Clipper game, which was maybe the best that may have been the best net performance of the season, and that says a lot.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I mean, I hope so. It's crazy to think, though, that with James Harden as a shell of his former self,
right,
and no Kyrie Irving, this team was still able to get to 21-9 before their last 2 victories. So
right,
they were winning a lot of games. Granted, not against the better teams in the league, but they were winning a lot of games without Harden playing like the Harden from last year. I hope so. I mean, his burst was back. His ability to get to the basket and do whatever the hell he wanted was back. His confidence was back. So, maybe that week off helped. Maybe he's worked himself back into game shape. But obviously, if we are going to get where we want to go, having James Harden look like the guy we saw last spring before he got injured, leading that team with Kyrie Irving, because let's not forget that the best regular season version of the Brooklyn Nets last year wasn't with Kevin Durant. It was actually with James Harden, Kyrie Irving leading the team, to where both of us and a lot of Net fans said, hey, could we win a title without KD? That was a thought, because forget their record with Harden and Kyrie, but it was great, like 26-4, something crazy like that. I don't have it in front of me. So obviously, if Harden can play at that kind of level, and knowing Kyrie's coming back, even though on a part-time basis, I think my confidence level as a Net fan is a lot higher than, say, 3.5 weeks ago when we were losing to the Bulls at home and getting embarrassed by Phoenix and Golden State.
Yeah, crazy. That's the same player because that Harden game versus the Bulls, he was just at his worst. I think he had a triple double in that game, which means nothing because Russell Westbrook had a triple double versus the Nets.
He missed in that game against Chicago. He must have missed 8 or 9 little bunnies right at the basket. Mm-hmm. That was kind of been his biggest issue when you analyze, all right, what's been the problem with James Harden this year besides not having a springy big man to kind of drop lobs to, which is now changing with Nicholas Claxton healthy and starting to click. But he was missing so many bunnies around the basket. And to his credit, after the Chicago game, he took the blame. He said, hey, this game's on me, which he was right about. I'm getting a lot of crap for something I tweeted at the end of the Laker game in which I said, man, thank God James Harden isn't our number one guy. And by the way, despite how well he played against the LA Clippers, and really no matter what he does over the next few months, my view on that isn't going to change. I mean, look, James Harden didn't win anything as the number one guy. We all witnessed that. We all saw that. We all saw him shrink in big moments. And part of why we have more confidence in him now is he doesn't have to be that guy. He doesn't need to be the number one guy on a championship team. Dude, you could argue he's the third guy on a championship team if Kyrie Irving is playing the way he did last year. So I doubled down on that. And that isn't even like this incredible insult of James Harden because it's irrelevant to you and I. He's not the number one guy on this team. It's just sometimes you're reminded when he needs to be with Durant out, with Irving out. It's a reminder to what we saw from afar and my concerns about, boy, I don't think I could win an NBA championship if James Harden's my number one guy. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. I brought it up because after the Harden game, I put out a tweet and I was taking a shot at like these national broadcasters that say James Harden isn't a good player anymore. He's done, blah, blah, blah. And people came back to me and they were like saying these things like, oh, so now you're against Evan. You don't think this? And I'm going, wait a minute. What is going on here? And then I took a look. Then I looked back at your tweets and figured it out. And I put it all together. I'm with you, though. And I was trying to tell people, like, I love James Harden. He's great. And I think I disagree with people saying he can't play basketball anymore. That's absurd. But this idea that you feel confident going into a playoff series with him as the number one and that he's going to lead you to a championship without Durant is foolish. I'll say this and oppose this. Let's imagine the Nets have to go into Milwaukee and he's the guy that has to lead them. Hell no. I mean, you don't. His track record isn't there. And it's a big track record. But if he's the guy alongside Durant and he can just be what that version of him next to KD, it changes everything. I don't think you're a hater. I think you're just being realistic. I can't believe people thought, show me the record where he has done this in the past and you feel good about like, well, you would deal Harden like in a big spot. I'd rather have Kyrie Irving than James Harden based on track record.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. So the reason I tweeted that and the reason it came to my brain was the way they were collapsing against the LA Lakers. Now, was I ever afraid they were going to lose the game? Yeah. I think when they tied it up with less than a minute to go, I said, holy crap, they're going to blow a 23-point lead in the fourth quarter. And here's my point. In that game, the Nets went, I think it was 5 minutes without a point, 5 minutes without a field goal. And my point is, if Kevin Durant's on the floor, that crap never happens.
No,
it doesn't. Kevin Durant is a walking mother effing bucket. Okay. By accident, he's going to not allow the Nets to go 5.5 minutes without scoring. So it was just a reminder that as great as James Harden played in that game and certainly followed up against the Clippers, as gifted of a scorer as he is, as much of a Hall of Famer as he is, it was in my face of, oh my God, James Harden's good, but he ain't Kevin Durant. And that's the guy I trust the most. And that's the guy who never would have allowed that run to happen. So as this slow death was occurring against the Lakers, and luckily they avoided it, and I give James Harden credit. I mean, the biggest play of the game was the lob to Nicholas Claxton, who dunked all over LeBron James. It was freaking fantastic. I loved it. It was amazing. It was just a reminder of what we don't have to worry about in this moment. And I say in this moment because you never know with injuries, that we don't have to rely on James Harden being the number one guy on a championship team. And look, I hope we never have to ask that question again. I hope James Harden never has to be the number one guy on a championship team, because that means he's here playing second or third fiddle to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So look, I know people take whatever you say as something that it isn't, too positively or too negatively, but it's part of why Twitter in so few characters really can't describe a true opinion. You almost need to discuss it to kind of give you reasons for it. Then I think more people would agree with each other. I think it's the same thing in politics, by the way. You boil something down to 2 sentences and you say that guy's a schmuck, a moron, or he's a genius. But you really need to hear more reasoning.
True.
And I don't think too many people would argue with what me and you were saying right now, which is Harden's been great. I hope he's back, but I'm damn happy he's not the number one guy on my team.
Yeah, there's something about Twitter that triggers people to get really angry. It's just something about the platform. It's like an inducive drug to just be mean, nasty, and back. And I'm a culprit of it as well. I'm not saying I'm not. And it just happens where you see that. And it is surprising that I guess I look at it as a term of endearment that Net fans wanted to defend their player, that they felt good about it. Like, hey, this is James Harden. I want to go out there. I want to make sure that he's defended. He's one of the history's 75 best NBA players of all time, blah, blah, blah. But you're right. I mean, we're not talking about a game versus the Clippers. We loved it. But we're talking about, all right, we're in May. We're in June. We're on the road versus the Milwaukee Bucks. We're on the road versus the Chicago Bulls in a big playoff spot, and we need a win. He's never done it before. And I know we're going round and round in circles here now, but it blew my mind with that. So I'm completely on board with you, and I agree. The little nuance when you discuss it, yeah, James Harden needs help, and the good news is Kevin Durant's there, and now Kyrie Irving's here, I guess, for road games. You and I were both on the record of saying we were into the idea of him being a part-time player. Now it's going to happen. Your excitement level and just intrigue in seeing Kyrie for half the games and what that's going to look like.
I'm a spoiled brat, and so are you, in that I'm glad he's coming back. I never had a full issue with the part-time thing as long as the players are on board. And clearly, based on what KD and James Harden has said, they're very much on board. Sounds like they've been on board for a while. But now that we're going to get him on a part-time basis, which will help, I want him on a full-time basis. And I think that's going to become our new worry. So while we watched every Nets game and talked about this great season so far, mildly great, whatever you want to call it, in the back of our mind, there would always be that discussion of, hey, do you think Kyrie's coming back? And I think what's going to happen now is it's going to morph into, hey, do you think Kyrie's going to be able to play home games at some point, whether it's him getting vaxxed or the rules of New York City changing. So I'm excited he's coming back. I don't think it hurts. The key was always the players being on board, that there isn't going to be resentment towards him. These guys are pros. I mean, you're inserting an all-star caliber player on road games, So yeah. How is that bad? Again, as long as the players are on board. But I do think we are going to now long for Kyrie Irving being eligible for home games, because I've had to, and I don't even want to answer it anymore, but I've had so many tweets and even calls to the radio station saying, do you think the Nets should lose games on purpose? Because home court advantage isn't a good thing with Kyrie Irving only playing road games. And I hate the question. I understand why people are thinking about it, but I just want it to go away. So yes, I'm excited Kyrie's back, but I just wish he was eligible for every freaking game, and we wouldn't have to have these thoughts or discussions.
Well, looking at this, if you ever got to that point where he was only available for playoff road games, right? I look at it like, well, of course I'd rather have home court, because let's say, for example, you lose that first game or you split at home. You go, all right, we're going on the road now to Philly, and Kyrie Irving's coming with us. Yeah. That's kind of cool. Like, I'm going to look at it from that different direction. Hopefully, again, he's a full-time player and he's with the squad for all of their playoff games down the road. But I'd look at it like, yeah, all right, we lost that game at home. We've got Kyrie who's able to come back, and we get him on the road now, and that's a big bonus versus the Sixers or something like that.
I agree. It's this mental gymnastics that we're going to do, because usually if you play your first 2 games at home, let's say we're playing the Bucks again, and we split the first 2 games at home, it's, oh, crap. Milwaukee did exactly what they needed to do. Now we can hijack that philosophy and say, look, we did what we need to do because we got Kyrie Irving for games 3 and 4. I hope it doesn't come to that, but you're right. There'll be like this weird mental gymnastics of rationalizing why, hey, we're going on the road, but look, we got Kyrie Irving inserted into the lineup.
And I think this season, because of how weird it's been with guys coming in and out of lineups, I mean, we've seen everybody, all of these names play for the Nets, and that's just not exclusive to the Nets. They were hit hard by COVID, but this has happened to a lot of teams. So for Kyrie to be inserted in some games and not others, in a lot of ways, every team is dealing with some example of that now because, all right, this guy's out, this guy's in. I don't even know who it was. Greg Monroe the other night. Well, I can't remember the player. He was like, I didn't even know who this guy was, but I'm glad he had 9 points tonight. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of weirdness that's going on. So I think this is, if there was a year for it, it kind of makes sense with all the crap that's gone on for everybody else.
Well, I'm not buying this by chance, but I just want to let you know that was a part of what the net excuse was for allowing Kyrie back, saying, hey, the continuity thing that we mentioned back in the preseason, doesn't mean as much because of everything going on with COVID. Now, I don't buy that that's their reason for allowing Kyrie Irving back, but I understand where you're coming from. And I understand that sentiment of one of the reasons they didn't want Irving to be a part-time player was your lack of continuity. The Nets, from the Toronto game to the Philly game to the Orlando game to coming out of the COVID stoppage, have basically played completely different rosters. You know, outside of, I think, Patty Mills and Blake Griffin, who've been the constants, the Nets have won games with like completely different teams. I mean, analyze who played the Raptor Nets game and then analyze who played the Nets Laker game. I mean, seriously, outside of Patty Mills and Blake Griffin,
different rosters.
It's a completely different roster, right? So the continuity thing is completely thrown out the window, but this cloud is still hanging over us because even as we have this discussion, I'm thinking, hey, I wonder if Kyrie Irving's going to be motivated to get vaxxed only because he's going to want to play that second game of a back-to-back with the second game at home. He's going to want to do that. And I'm starting to wonder, hey, Mayor Adams becomes the mayor in a week. Is he going to change the rules? So it's still hovering above our heads, the whole uncertainty of Kyrie. And it's frustrating. I'm a little jealous. They announced these new vaccine mandates in Washington, and within 4 days, Bradley Beal gets vaccinated. Like, oh, I may not be able to play. Shoot me up. And we're still sitting here basically praying Kyrie Irving gets vaxxed.
It's impossible to know what will happen in the future. You mentioned the mayor. Are there entertainer, options where they can, get involved and that changes things? Or does Kyrie have a change of heart, change of mind in his philosophy and what the deal is with the vaccine? Who knows? I don't. I'm curious. I want to ask you this one last Nets question. Who do you think is the 4th most important net on the roster if Irving's back? Like, who could you not live without for the fourth player?
So I'm debating between Patty Mills, Joe Harris, and Nicholas Claxton. And Claxton is now in that mix because of, first of all, his partnership now with James Harden. You know, Harden having that athletic, springy guy he can throw lobs to and make a lot of money for, like he did with Clint Capella. So, and Claxton's ability to basically defend everybody. So Nicholas Claxton has certainly kind of moved up that list, but you need shooting. I mean, we saw it in the Milwaukee series. You need a guy who can hit that big shot. And so Patty Mills is the healthy one. Joe Harris is the guy we're always going to have questions about based on the way he disappeared at the back end of that Milwaukee series. So it's really between those 3 guys, but I'd say probably Patty Mills at this point. Patty's done such a great job stepping up with all these injuries. He's the guy with the playoff track record. He's the guy you've texted me numerous times and said, Patty Mills is going to hit a shot that changes our life. So I would probably have to pick Patty, but it's between those 3 guys.
You know what's going to happen. It's going to be Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Nets down 102-101 in Phoenix. 3 seconds on the clock. Durant moves the ball, kicks it over to Mills for the win. Clank. And then it'll just be Biseglia. You piece of shit. You texted me nonstop. This guy's going to make it, and he's going to now miss that shot that could have.
No.
You
now
said
I can see
that. I can see
you
it
said
now.
I've
jinxed us.
No, you said he's going to change our lives. I mean,
Well, that's
this is a
true.
buzzer beater
That's true.
game 7.
That's a good
I
point.
mean, in bad ways, it'll change our lives.
That's
we'll have
fair.
that memory to live with forever.
That's a fair point. We'll end it with a little net-Nick combination here. Would you want to see the Knicks in the first round if you're a Nets fan? So the Nets are going to be the top 3 seed. I think that's fair to say. The Knicks then get into the play-in, somehow manage their way in, find the Nets. Would you want to see that first round matchup? Or would you rather see all right, it's the Celtics again, the Hawks slip in, the Wizards fall there, whatever it might be? Would you rather any of those teams, and the realistic teams that are going to be in that pocket, the Hornets of the world, or let's have it. Let's bring on Randle and the Knicks.
So I'll ask you a question. I'll answer your question by asking you a question. So last year, the Brooklyn Nets drew the Boston Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. The Brooklyn Nets won game 1. The Brooklyn Nets won game 2, got off to a great start in game 3. You were in my house for that one, and blew game 3. All right, lost game 3.
Yeah.
Bounced back, won game 4, I think on Memorial Day, and then finished them off in game 5. All right. Let's say that was the Knicks. Let's say everything about that series was the same, except the Brooklyn Nets were playing the New York Knicks. I'm telling you, the Nets are going to win the series in 5. That feeling of losing game 3 at Madison Square Garden and the people outside the Garden celebrating and bing bong, Kevin Durant, don't you win? Like everything that goes along with that. And then the 48 hours of waiting before game 4. Even if we destroy them in game 4, like we did Boston, even if we destroy them in game 5, like we did Boston, everything works out the same. Do you want to live in a universe in which for 48 effing hours, we have to deal with that?
Well, I think you know my answer on that.
The answer is hell no. So unless you can guarantee me we are going to sweep them, okay? And blow them out in every game too, by the way. No close games. Maybe game 4, the sweep game, we'll let that be close. Unless you can guarantee me it is going to be a sweet annihilation, I don't want to deal with it. Even knowing I win the series in 5, there's going to be like that Rocky 1 moral victory from Knicks fans. We beat you in game 3. Ah, remember when Evan 48 dropped 30 on your ass? Like,
right.
That will kill me. So despite the fact that we all know the Nets would beat the Knicks, barring, catastrophic injuries, of course, I just don't know if I have the stomach for that. I know you don't have the stomach for that. And I think there's a lot of Net fans that have to take a step back and realize that, again, even winning in 5, do you really want to deal with the bing bongs and the don't you wish you were a Knick and the dancing in the streets? Do you really want to deal with that? The answer is clearly no.
There are some younger, newer Net fans that would be into it. I personally would be not. I've been on the record of saying I want nothing to do with the Knicks in the playoffs because of how annoying that would be and the anxiety it would induce. The similarities with the Celtics series would be, Kemba Walker games 4 and 5 wouldn't play because he's hurt. That would probably happen with something like that where he got run down, and Evan Fournier would be destroyed by Kevin Durant. And that would be
True.
Similarities because you do have the Celtics backcourt, but I'm with you, Evan. I want nothing to do with that. I want nothing to experience that. And I've had people say, well, be more confident with you. It's like, I just hate the Knicks so much that I don't want to have to deal with it. And I will say the winning the series would be sweeter, but the ultimate prize isn't that right now. It's winning a championship. So I'd rather not deal with early stress that I want to feel later on in the playoffs.
Well, and also it's not a lack of confidence because I didn't say to you, we're going to lose the series or I'm afraid of losing the series. I simply said, I don't want to deal with the Knicks winning a game. And look, there's a really good chance they're going to win a game. I didn't say 2 games. I didn't say 3 games. And God knows I didn't say 4 games. I'm, I guess, sensitive enough, if that's the word you want to use. You could use whatever word you want. I don't want to deal with the Knicks winning a game. So it really has nothing to do with a lack of confidence. It's more than, it's just something I'd rather not deal with. I'd rather win the first round series in anonymity. Help me out there, Bisegs.
I can't.
Anonymity. There you go.
You got it. I'm not, sometimes with words I get, what's the word I'm looking for? No, I'm joking. I understand. Sometimes it slips my brain. I hear you. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to see it. And I just want to win a championship. And
I will say this.
We'll do it.
I will say this. Let's say the Nets are the 1 seed. Okay. I would love to see the Knicks in the 8 seed not consolation game. The whatever the hell
the play-in tournament. The
play-in tournament where they're playing for the 8 seed. And so let's say it's Knicks Celtics, Madison Square Garden, because the Knicks lost the battle for the 7 seed. So it's Knicks Celtics, winner gets the 8 seed, loser goes home. I would love to see that game, knowing if the Knicks win, they get the Nets. The Garden crowd is chanting F Brooklyn, we want Brooklyn, and then they lose. Like that would be tremendous. So you get this close, Knicks fans, to get Knicks Nets. You're right there, the Garden, the Celtics, and then Jason Tatum sticks it up your ass. Like that would be fun.
Oh man. Well, it's for the frustrating thing is all right. So the Knicks 16-18, Nets 23-9. We're basically a third-ish plus through the season. There is a long way to go. And as we talked about, Alex and I talked about, you and I had talked about, things are changing so fast. Things are changing in our world. Who knows where things will be in life? Kyrie Irving not coming. Now he is playing. So it's a long way to go. Maybe Julius Randle turns it around, but heading into 2022, I guess right now there's optimism with the Knicks with a couple of wins, and then the Nets getting Kyrie Irving back. Thank you again, Evan, for joining me on Bad Weather Fans, filling in for Alex. Of course, find Evan on WFAN. Harden and Robert's doing an awesome job listening to you guys. Always do enjoy it when I'm working and I'm not listening to bad weather because I'm narcissistic and want to hear myself. But Evan, thank you for filling in for Alex. You did a great job as a fake Knick fan to start this podcast. Thank you.
I am deeply honored by the invitation. Thank you very much, bro.